welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea from Game Informer, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. July is a super busy travel month for me, so once again, I am pre-recording this episode. Normally I do some kind of anniversary celebration, but there's no big Nintendo anniversaries this week, so I'm turning the show over to the listeners of this fine podcast. This is going to be just you talking with me about whatever is on your mind. So some of these comments that I got are from recent episodes. Others are questions that I posted on the free All Things Nintendo Patreon page, which is a great excuse to remind you to join the Patreon team. It's the best way to interact with the show and get the latest info on the podcast outside of just listening. You can submit questions and topic suggestions there, or you can just email me directly at brian@allthingsnintendo.com. And finally, be sure to check out my new YouTube channel where I'm posting not only the full video version of each episode, but also more edited clips with trailers embedded. I'm currently trying to push to get this new channel up to 500 subscribers because everybody keeps telling me that is the most important milestone for a new YouTube channel. And by the way, speaking of video elements of this show, I've been also putting up some very short clips on TikTok. I was going to experiment with YouTube Shorts because everybody keeps telling me that that is like algorithm heaven for YouTube. But the name YouTube Shorts is not kidding, because I made a 1.5 minute long video for Shorts only to find out that Shorts only go up to 1 minute. So maybe I'll do more with that in the future. But for now, it's TikTok at Brian P. Shea and regular YouTube. Those are the places that you can go for more digestible All Things Nintendo clips. So as I mentioned, we are going to be talking pretty much exclusively about the topics that you want to talk about, the people who submitted questions, comments, and even got a rant from one of the listeners here. So, but before I jump into the listener questions and comments, I wanted to talk briefly about the news that I've missed since the last kind of timely episode that I've done. This episode is being pre-recorded early as well, but we might as well play a little bit of catch up before next week's episode. So first up, during a special Sonic Team Anime Expo panel, got our first look at Sonic X Shadow Generations Dark Beginnings. So it is an anime-style 3-episode prologue that tells a little bit about Shadow's origins, and they showed off a scene. So the scene we got shows Shadow and Maria talking kind of sweetly, as they typically do in Sonic Adventure 2, before the space colony explodes, and a surprise appearance from what appears to be Emerald from Sonic Battle. He shows up, and then Shadow chases after him, and then he finds Emerald, and Emerald's grabbing what appears to be Gerald Robotnik. And then just as the fight scene begins, which seems like it's going to be awesome, it fades to black, of course. The art style is absolutely gorgeous, and it's written by Ian Flynn, who's been writing the Sonic comics for, like 15, 20 years now. He also has started writing for the games. I believe Sonic Frontiers was his first major foray into that. And then it's animated by Studio Gigex, which I am not super familiar with them. Their website doesn't tell a whole lot of information, but their Twitter account, which appears to be inactive since 2022, does seem to indicate that they were their first project was working on some of the Vampire Survivors trailers. So like I said, the animation looks absolutely gorgeous. I'm very excited for this. It's set to debut this fall, almost certainly just ahead of the October 25th release date of Sonic X Shadow Generations. And then speaking of Sonic X Shadow Generations, shout out to Tails channel on Twitter and then NintendoLife.com for reporting on this. The Japanese Sonic X Shadow Generations website may be teasing a 4th playable character for this Greatest Hits compilation. We already know about Classic Sonic and Modern Sonic. They were in the original Sonic Generations that came out in 2011. But Shadow is the new character that they've been advertising. I mean, he's in the game's title. But it looks like there may be a 2nd playable character for the Shadow Generations portion of the package. So you can switch between Sonic Generations and Shadow Generations. They're distinct campaigns, and you can switch between them on the website as well. And when you go on the Sonic side, it shows Classic Sonic and it shows Modern Sonic as the 2 playable characters. Then when you go to the Shadow side, it actually shows Shadow and then an empty box that says coming soon. And I have no idea who that could be unless it's some kind of classic Shadow. But that's actually a very interesting wrinkle to this package if it ends up being a classic Shadow, because from what I understand, it's the first ever classic Shadow appearance in a game. I actually, back when Sonic Superstars was coming out, we did a cover story for the game, and I sat down with Takashi Iizuka for probably way too long, and I was drilling him about various aspects, and I asked him about, is Shadow going to be in this? And they said, oh, well, during the classic series, Takashi Iizuka said, during the classic series, Sonic and Shadow didn't know each other. And then I made a joke like, oh, Shadow was still kind of in the pod when the classic series was going. And he's like, yeah, exactly. So I don't know if there's going to be some sort of classic Shadow appearance in this. Maybe it'll tie back to the Sonic X Shadow Dark Beginnings anime prologue. But I'm very much looking forward to learning more about that. And as I mentioned, that comes to Switch and every other major platform on October 25th. Then also at Anime Expo, we got the announcement of The Legend of Heroes Trails Through Daybreak 2. And the first Trails Through Daybreak just came out. And the second one looks like it's going to carry on the story of that game. And then it presents what appears to be, based on the synopsis from NIS, a murder mystery of some sort. And it looks like it's going to involve new factions that emerge following the events of the first game. I'm honestly not a Legend of Heroes Trails fan. People sing their praises to me all the time. We've reviewed the ones we've reviewed at Game Informer have reviewed pretty highly. It all boils back to like with what time, right? Like I just never feel like I have the opportunity to kind of sit down and try another one of these large scale RPGs. Like the last time I really dove into a large scale RPG and stuck with it, that wasn't from an established franchise that I was already in love with, was Persona 5 back in 2017. And I mean, that worked out pretty well because I am obsessed with the Persona series now, but it feels so unwieldy to jump into these games for me. But I would like to try them at some point. Everybody keeps telling me that I would probably love them, and I don't disagree. I think that based on everything that I've seen, I bet that I would love them. I just don't know what the best jumping on point is. So if you're a fan of these games, let me know what the best jumping on point is, and maybe we'll go from there. What I guess also, because it's been going for a while now, what's the best game to play in 2024? Because I have a feeling that some of these mechanics may not have aged as well. And as any franchise goes, like as the series goes on, they refine these mechanics and they make it so that you learn something. Like that's the reason that all of these game sequels tend to be upgrades over their originator or over the debut entry. Like look at Assassin's Creed 2. It was a huge improvement over the original Assassin's Creed. Uncharted 2, massive leap forward. Mass Effect 2, I know some people prefer the writing and the choice mechanics of the first Mass Effect, but from a gameplay perspective, Mass Effect 2 was a giant leap forward. And because, movies, they typically have like their great ideas, and then like when success comes, they're like, we should make a sequel. That happens in gaming too, but they're able to iterate on those game mechanics. So I don't know if that's the case with the Trails series. So if there is a game that I should start with, let me know, and I will add it to my giant pile of games that I keep saying I'm going to check out. But yeah, maybe one day. But Trails Through Daybreak 2 is set to arrive on Switch in early 2025. And then finally, last news story here. It was kind of a slow news week. I'm recording this on Tuesday or Monday night. I'm sorry. And so there wasn't a whole lot of news coming out of the holiday week here in the United States. But we have one final news piece. And a few weeks ago during the Nintendo Direct, Nintendo announced that Nintendo Switch Sports was getting a free basketball update sometime this summer. And they kept saying just this summer. That's the only window we got. Turns out that sometime this summer is right now. It actually came out on Tuesday. They didn't. I don't know why they didn't just announce it during the Nintendo Direct instead of basically shadow dropping it over Nintendo's Twitter account. I don't know why they would do that. Unless there was like they were waiting for like some sort of like finalization on the development. But it seems like they probably had this pretty well in the can when they announced this. So it's weird that they would just kind of shadow drop this. But if you want to play 2-on-2 basketball or take part in shooting competitions, you can now download the free update for Nintendo Switch Sports if you own that game right now. Like I said, not a whole lot of news, so I'm going to take a quick break, and when I return, I'll be diving into my inbox. I will be right back. We are back, and I'm going to spend the rest of this episode talking about pretty much whatever you all want me to talk about. As I mentioned at the top of the show, I put up a thread on the free All Things Nintendo Patreon page, also posted about it on Twitter, the Game Informer community Discord, put out a call for emails. I got a pretty good response, so we're going to get to as many of these responses as we can. Let's lead off with some comments from last week's show. So one big response emerged from a few different sources. So on Patreon, Fumblehead said, Brian, you said Animal Well was not on Switch. It is on Switch for $24.99 plus tax. On Game Informer Community Discord, Shane Whippen said, couldn't remember if you looked it up during the show, but if not, file this under corrections, and posts a picture of Animal Well on the Switch eShop. And then finally, at ShyBoyTM on Twitter said, just a heads up, Animal Well is on Switch. That's where I played it day one. Yeah, that is that's on me. Last week's episode with Victor Lucas, I did, in fact, I believe pretty confidently say, oh no, Animal Well's not on Switch. Yes, it is. And I messed that one up. So yeah, that was the most resounding comment that came out of last week's episode. I think people enjoyed the episode. And if you enjoyed the episode, I appreciate any feedback you gave. But yeah, Animal Well is in fact on Nintendo Switch, and I was playing it on PlayStation, and I think because I was playing it on PlayStation, I just assumed that it wasn't on Switch because why wouldn't I play that on Switch? But yeah, it is on Nintendo Switch, and I have really enjoyed what I've played so far. So I would recommend go checking that out if you like kind of like exploration based platformers, kind of like Metroidvanias, with a lot of challenge behind them. I've very much enjoyed my time with Animal Well. Shout out to Big Mode for their just a banger of a debut title for their publishing arm for Video Game Donkey. Amazing work on that. So let's swing it over to a comment from Brooke over on Patreon. They say this is in response to talking about last week's episode with Victor Lucas talking about what's your game of the year so far. Brooke says, Balatro is definitely one of the contenders, one of my contenders for game of the year too. I'm not great at it, but once you get a decent run going, it is thrilling to see how far you can push through your current setup. The main theme of the game is also such a great piece of music, which is impressive considering how long you may be listening to it. That's very true. If you like it, check out Don Palombi's live arrangement of it on YouTube. All right, we'll have to do that. But yeah, Balatro, absolutely incredible game. I cannot sing the praises of that enough. It doesn't have to be like you're a poker fan or anything like that. It just I still cannot stop playing it on flights. I was actually very, very bummed. I was, like I said, I was traveling last week and I'm traveling this week, but last week I got on my plane and something happened with my Switch where it turned on in the case. So by the time I got on my flight, it was down to 22%. Thankfully, it was only a 2-hour flight, but I was very upset about that. So I played Balatro and Metal Slug Attack Reloaded for like a total of like 25 minutes, and then the Switch died. So I had to basically just look out the window and contemplate existence while I listened to other podcasts and music. But yeah, Balatro, very, very good game. And Brooke recommends Dom Palombi's live arrangement on YouTube. So go check that out if you are so inclined. This was also in response to last week's episode from Chad on Patreon. Quote, hearing Victor talk about how wonderful it was for him to have a role at Nintendo Live was super awesome and touching. I agree. Victor is a super authentic guy. I have loved all the interactions I've had with him, and he was one of my favorite guests I've had in a long time. So shout out to Victor Lucas. Go check out the Electric Playground Network over on YouTube. Lots of incredible archival stuff happening over there, both with like classic episodes from the 90s, but also like you can go see his current podcast, and you can check out all of his current content. Like I said, he's doing reviews over there. He's doing interviews with other people in the industry. Highly recommend his channel over there, Electric Playground. Um, and over on the video version, speaking of YouTube, last week's episode, I received the following comment from just_Jude_live. Quote, I love this podcast so much. I just had a funny thought, and I mean this in the best way possible. I guess this is from 2 weeks ago, actually. In my notes I put last week. I mean this in the best way possible, but Kyle looks like a regional variant of Brian. Just saying, LOL. I love that so much. Yeah, Kyle has been growing in a beard, and I've been growing my hair out, so it actually it works out because he has traditionally had longer hair and been clean shaven, and I've always had shorter hair and a beard. So we're meeting in the middle here. I made the joke in response to this comment that we're gonna have to start referring to Kyle as a lowland Brian over at Game Informer. Um, and then in that same comment section, I received this from at Three Swords Sama. The $60 price point on a remaster is kind of tough if there isn't a ton of new content. A new coat of paint is fine, I guess, but I'm not going to drop $60 on an old game with new paint and no new content to speak of. I did buy Metroid Prime Remastered in physical form and Link's Awakening in physical too, even though I played those back in the day. However, I won't be buying Luigi's Mansion 2, Donkey Kong Country Returns, and Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door due to the price. Unless, of course, my kids really want those games. Laughing face emoji. Yeah, I mean, that's a tough thing, right? Like, Metroid Prime Remastered, I believe I said that was $40 when it launched, which is fantastic. And then the other games, though, being $60, it's a little rough. Obviously, prices have started going up recently. We saw Tears of the Kingdom kind of crack that $70 price point for Nintendo. But I think that a lot of people who bought that game would say that they kind of got their money's worth. When you look over at the price points for these remasters, though, like, it's a tougher sell, right? Like Luigi's Mansion 2, as much as Kyle enjoyed that when he reviewed it for Game Informer, it wasn't it's not a fully new game, right? It's a 3DS title that they basically just upscaled for the Switch. Donkey Kong Country Returns came out on the Wii. That's 2 generations ago, and it's almost going to be 3 generations ago once it hits next year. Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door was 3 generations ago, and that game's 20 years old. Is that how old that game is? I better fact check myself here after I messed up the Animal Well thing, but I think that came out in 2004, right? Yeah, 2004 is when Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door originally came out, and that's a steep price for a game that it didn't really do a whole lot in terms of updates, right? And it's a beloved title, and I'm not saying that they don't put a lot of work into it, but it's kind of tough, especially when it's 1 generation removed from stuff that is included in the Nintendo Switch Online subscription, right? Like, you can get Nintendo 64 games that hit within that same decade at no additional cost if you're paying the $50 a year subscription price for the expansion pack. So when you're looking at something like Perfect Dark being included in the Nintendo Switch Online catalog, and then Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, which is just a few years later, it's a little bit of a strange thing to be like, this one game, which, as beloved as Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door is, as beloved as it is, it's more expensive than an entire year of the Nintendo Switch Online catalog. And it's strange that Nintendo does that, but also, like, I've been saying this since the very beginning of this podcast. Trying to predict what Nintendo will do is just a fool's errand. Like, there's no way that you can look at Nintendo's track record and be like, oh yeah, this is 100% what they're going to do. Like, nobody expected the Wii. Nobody expected the Wii U, nor should they have, because Nintendo should not have even done the Wii U, even if it served as an appropriate half step towards the Switch. However, it's even more true when it comes to their game release methods. Like, I mentioned this either last week or the week before. It almost seemed, or probably 2 weeks ago, actually, when Camille was on here talking about the Nintendo Direct, it seemed like Nintendo was winding down the Switch, right? Like, it seemed like, all right, we got Mario versus Donkey Kong, we've got Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. We got Luigi's Mansion 2. These are all remakes or remasters. It seemed like Nintendo was kind of on like coast mode when it came to Switch, like basically running out the clock until Switch 2 or whatever it ends up being called is able to come out. That didn't appear to be the case when the direct hit, because we got all these amazing announcements, not the least of which are Mario and Luigi Brothership, and then on top of that, a new 2D Zelda game starring Zelda, and then finally a look at Metroid Prime 4. And it's like, all right, well, maybe Nintendo isn't winding down the Switch. Maybe this was just a weird first half of 2024. And yeah, I mean, it's really hard to predict what Nintendo's going to do, but like the best thing I can tell you, Three Sword Sama, when it comes to like not wanting to spend money on these prices, is that's the way you can tell them you don't want to spend this much money on remasters from 2 decades ago, right? Is just you don't buy them. Maybe wait for a sale, which, as we've covered on this show extensively, is very rare. It's any kind of meaningful price cut on a Nintendo first party game. But like, yeah, like if you don't want to spend that money, I would just say vote with your wallet, right? Like if Luigi's Mansion 2, if you want to play it, like that's probably more likely to go on sale to like something like $40 than maybe a thing like Tears of the Kingdom. Like that's probably your best bet, is just, don't buy it. I'm not gonna tell you that like you're not missing out, because of course you are. Like any decision is going to have consequences, but at the same time, like if you feel like you don't want to swing it and you can miss out on it, then by all means do that. Send that message to Nintendo. And if Luigi's Mansion 2, it seems like it did sell pretty well, but say Paper Mario or Donkey Kong Country Returns comes back and doesn't sell well, that's the time that Nintendo is going to come back and be like, oh, maybe we aren't pricing this properly, or maybe we need to cut this, maybe we need to do like a Switch's greatest hits line and put some of these games in there and make them have the $40 price point or something like that. But right now Nintendo is basically printing money, and in the eyes of consumers, they can do no wrong. They are burning up the charts. I don't know if there's really any debate that they have won this console generation. Like PlayStation 5, Sony has admitted it's been slow off the line. We're 4 years deep into that console cycle. Xbox Series X, same thing. Doesn't seem like that community is super stoked. The first party titles, there's been some really good ones, but they've not matched the magnitude of the Switch. So Nintendo's kind of in a phase where they can just do whatever they want. And the way that their hubris is what would ultimately kill them at this point, because they could be like so on fire and so like kind of feeling themselves that they could just continue to price these things at these high prices, and as long as people buy them, they're going to keep doing it. So that would be my only suggestion. I mean, I'm looking forward to playing Donkey Kong Country Returns. I did not pick up Luigi's Mansion 2 because kind of for that same reason, but yeah, Metroid Prime Remastered, it was I thought that was fantastic. I did get a review code for that. Link's Awakening, I bought that. But yeah, some of these other ones, I am a little bit hesitant to pull the trigger. But yeah, that's my best advice there. And I agree with you. It is a little bit of a tough pill to swallow. As I mentioned on the YouTube channel, I am pulling out some clips, and I pulled one from my episode with my friend Dan Reichert. It was titled "Where Does Mario Kart Go From Here?" And this is a response from at IPO Rush 1667 saying, "You have more work done into the characters rather than the tracks. Each have a unique cooldown ability. You can do 3 paths to one, and each have different risks and rewards, and they favor different kinds of builds," talking about where they think the Mario Kart franchise could go from here. So let's break this down. All right. More work done into the characters rather than the tracks. I could see that, because think about the booster course pass that Nintendo just put out for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Yes, there were new characters. I mean, they were not really new characters. They're characters that have appeared in other Mario Kart games, but they were new to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. So yes, but the main selling point was the 90, or getting the track total up to 96 tracks. So 48 new tracks as part of the booster course pass. So doing more work into the characters rather than the tracks. I think that is probably the best route to go, unless they just pull out all the stops and just go off the wall with some of the tracks, or an amazing new a gimmick, for lack of a better word. Each character having a unique cooldown ability. So Nintendo has toyed with this a little bit when it comes to Mario Kart games, right? Like they did that in Super Mario Kart with the AI racers. Like Donkey Kong could throw banana peels, Bowser could throw fireballs, Yoshi would throw out Yoshi eggs. But yeah, largely the series has been focused on having the power-ups do the heavy lifting in terms of like the battle or competitive angles, and a lot of the rubber banding stuff for that matter. I do like the idea of having characters have unique cooldowns. I think that actually would be pretty cool. And I think a lot of players are conditioned to that idea now more than ever, thanks to hero shooters and other competitive multiplayer games. And I think Mario Kart, there could be a classic mode, and there could potentially be like, I don't know if you want to call it hero mode, or just like say it's Mario Kart 9, they could have Mario Kart classic mode and Mario Kart 9 mode or something like that, and have those be the cooldowns. Because I think that there would be people who would want that kind of more traditional Mario Kart experience, or maybe just some switch that you could do to turn off the unique cooldown abilities and just rely purely on it. Like make it like Super Smash Brothers, where you can customize every element that you want. Like you can have it be the unique cooldowns, have it be power ups, have it be no power ups, so it's just pure racing ability. But yeah, that I think is a very interesting idea from IPO Rush here. Um, Next suggestion they had was you can do 3 paths to 1, and each have different risks and rewards. I like that. I think that they do that to a minor extent right now, where there's different shortcuts and everything that you can take. Some of them have like a more narrow passageway, or you have to make a special jump. Like I was just playing this past week, and playing on Rainbow Road, there, especially the SNES version in particular, there's that jump that you can take. It's not really an alternate path, but it's a risk reward. You have to have a mushroom, and you have to hit the jump just right to make that jump and not fall into the pit. So if they expanded on that idea, I think that would be cool. And I'm a Sonic fan, so of course I'm going to be in favor of having different branching paths. That's such a hallmark of Sonic. And they reward you based on how good you are. They give you different things based on that. So I think that could be a route that Nintendo could also explore. And then the final suggestion was these different paths could favor different kinds of builds. And we already see like some customization. It's not so much the like stat based as much as it is cosmetic, but there is a little bit of stat involvement when you're selecting your character. So there's definitely some expansion they could do. Those are all good suggestions. I appreciate you chiming in there, IPO Rush. I think those are all valid suggestions. And then over on the Game Informer community Discord, we still have that All Things Nintendo channel. I got the following from jherb24. Hey, Brian, thanks as always for continuing to do the pod. Great content. Thank you so much. I've been making my way through Mario Wonder and loving it, but I'm thinking, where does 2D Mario go next? Do we think we get another Lost Levels-esque hyper difficult expansion pack? Also, are we confident the next 3D Mario is Odyssey 2? Seems like Nintendo is into surprising us at this point. Thanks. All right, so let's start at the top here. Where does 2D Mario go next? I mean, this is a tough one because I've been like, up until Mario Wonder's announcement, I was thinking that 2D Mario was going to be the less experimental part of the Mario franchise, right? Like, look at how Nintendo has done since 2004, really. So after Super Mario Sunshine, we got in the 3D side, we got Mario Galaxy, we got Super Mario 3D World, we got Super Mario 3D Land, and we got Mario Galaxy 2, and then we got Super Mario 3D World, and 3D Land came after Mario Galaxy 2 because those were Wii U and 3DS. But then we got Odyssey, right? So those are all super creative games. I mean, Mario Galaxy 2 might be, and Mario 3D World. Well, Mario 3D World was super interesting as well. And then we also got Bowser's Fury on the Switch. But Mario Galaxy 2 might be the least creative out of those, but still, that's pretty creative. And the only reason it's not super creative is because it is a direct sequel that borrows so many of the gimmicks from the first Mario Galaxy, but they still expanded on them in so many different ways. Then on the 2D side, we got New Super Mario Brothers, New Super Mario Brothers Wii, New Super Mario Brothers U, New Super Mario Brothers 2, and that was really it. It felt really stagnant, right? Like New Super Mario Brothers Wii and New Super Mario Brothers U really felt like almost like remakes, right, of the same game. Like even the UI is almost indistinguishable from each other. And yeah, we got New Super Luigi U, which is one of the better 2D, one of the best 2D content drops that we got on the New Super Mario Brothers franchise. And I really enjoyed that DLC. But I mean, Mario Maker was probably the best innovation that we got on the 2D side. So I was like, okay, well, they've kind of tapped out on innovating in this space outside of like new power ups and everything. They're kind of just playing on these past glories, which is even what Mario Maker was, right? It was giving us a tool set using the old Mario formats, right? You can go in, you can play Mario World levels that are created by the community, or same thing with Mario 3 and all the different Mario games, still relying heavily on the nostalgia aspect. Super Mario Brothers Wonder, and as much as I enjoyed the new Super Mario Brothers games, Super Mario Brothers Wonder was the first time that I really felt like this was not just fully playing on nostalgia, right? Of course, there's going to be some nostalgic element to it, and it's because 2D Mario games are nostalgic by default because it's the gameplay that so many of us grew up loving. It plays off of the foundation that was laid. I mean, I guess primarily in Super Mario Brothers, the original Super Mario Brothers, but I would say mm, it's closest to Super Mario World in terms of its pedigree because it does so many different things with the level designs, and the level conventions veer closer to Super Mario World than uh, the original Super Mario Brothers. But it's that format, that original NES SNES format that any 2D Mario game is going to use. It even has like the overworld that you can the map that you can run around on. But where does it go from there? I mean, Takashi Tezuka and Shiro Mori, they both told me that they were thousands of ideas that they had for wonder effects. When I was writing the Mario Wonder cover story, they said there were thousands of ideas, and there was no way they could use all of them. They cut them down to the set that we got in Super Mario Brothers Wonder. But I've got to feel like there were some other gems that we just did not get, and maybe it's kind of like a Tears of the Kingdom situation where they released Breath of the Wild, and then as Hidemaru Fujibayashi told me, he went back and he was like, oh, I wonder if we could do this with this gameplay and physics engine. And he ended up building the tank that he put wheels on a slab of concrete and started driving around like a car, and then he put four planks together and put one of the bombs in there, and then put a cannonball in there and created a cannon basically. And that was the advent of Tears of the Kingdom, was like, oh, what if we allowed players to build their own vehicles? I think that there's a chance on the 2D side that Tezuka, Mori, and the rest of the team, maybe once they released Mario Wonder and they started seeing fan reception, and they got deeper into the playtesting, I would not be surprised if they came up with some other cool ideas. So I think it's entirely possible, if not likely, that we get a Mario Wonder 2, or maybe like a Mario Wonder Deluxe on Switch 2, which could give us, you know, additional levels or additional wonder effects or something like that, right? Like just additional content overall is where I think we could go with Mario Wonder and the 2D side next. Um, I would love to see a Mario Maker 2 or a Mario Maker 3, excuse me. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think we're going to get Mario Maker 3 for a long while. And it's unfortunate because I love it. But as I covered before, I want to say 2 weeks ago, it just didn't sell well. Mario Maker 2 did not create the buzz that the first Mario Maker did on Wii U, despite selling better than the Wii U, but relative to other Switch titles, it did not sell as well. So I don't think Mario Maker 3 would be where the 2D Mario goes next. I don't think we're going to get another new Super Mario Brothers game for a while. I feel like that would almost feel stale when compared to Mario Wonder in 2025 or 2026 or whenever the next Mario game comes out. I honestly think it's going to be Super Mario Brothers Wonder Deluxe, and we're going to get it on Switch 2 pretty early on in the life cycle. It's going to have new levels. It's going to have one of the main criticisms of not being able to play online co-op. You know, there's competitive online, but not true online co-op. Um, and yeah, just new challenges, new stuff along those lines. If not, maybe a full new Mario Wonder game. But I would be surprised they don't try to capitalize on some enhanced version of Mario Wonder, or at least another crack at it in Mario Wonder 2. But outside of that, you know, your guess is as good as mine of like in terms of like what new innovations, because I would have never seen something like Super Mario Brothers Wonder. And you may, if you're watching the video version, you keep seeing me look up because I'm looking at the cover that I have framed of Elephant Mario on my wall. And I mean, I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe J Herb is right, and that we do get kind of a Lost Levels esque difficult expansion pack. But I don't know if it would necessarily be hyper difficult, because Super Mario Brothers Wonder was not that difficult until you got to the very end of the bonus content, right? The end game content was really the only part of that game that I truly struggled with. I didn't even have any problems with the boss. It was one of the easier 2D Mario games up until that very end stuff. The last two levels were the only two levels that I really was like banging my head up against a wall on. So maybe we do get something new with Mario Wonder. Then to J Herb's second question here, are we confident the next 3D Mario is Odyssey 2? Seems like Nintendo is into surprising us at this point. No, we're not confident that it's Odyssey 2, but I'm leaning in that direction. I think that it's kind of the same reasoning that I have for Mario Wonder 2 or Mario Wonder Deluxe. That game was so tailor made for DLC. If you look at it, having the ability to just, they could have added kingdoms as DLC and they didn't. And that would have been such an easy win for them to add like Isle Delfino or just all new kingdoms. Instead, we just didn't get any of it. And we got Luigi's like hide and seek, and like that was fun, but it wasn't the meaningful content I think everybody wanted. And to that end, my theory is that Nintendo did have those ideas, and they looked at them and said, these are so good, they should be their own game. And then it got into development. And, you know, like I've pointed out in the past, Super Mario Odyssey came out the same year as Breath of the Wild. And yet we got a direct Zelda sequel prior to getting a direct sequel to Mario Odyssey. Yes, I know that they used the same Hyrule, but they also had to, you know, craft a whole new story for Tears of the Kingdom. They crafted all the Sky Islands. They crafted the depths, which, you know, you could have criticisms about how fleshed out the depths really are. But they had to come up with all the new shrine puzzles, the new dungeons. That should seemingly take longer than a new 3D Mario game. So, as I pointed out with Camille on the Nintendo Direct episode, I think that Mario Odyssey 2 is going to be a launch title for Switch 2. That's my prediction. That's not based on any kind of inside information that I have. That is just a prediction. I think that Nintendo, what happened in 2017 was they saw the success of Mario Odyssey. They were going to put out DLC because that looks like it was the surefire way to expand that experience, keep people coming back for more. When they realized they had great ideas that could be expanded into a full game, they said, well, let's make it a full game and put out Luigi's hide and seek or balloon hunt or whatever it's called to satisfy people and keep them coming back while developing these additional ideas that we had into a new game. Then development happened, and instead of being like, oh, we're going to rush this out for Switch, they probably said, we need a big title for the Switch 2 launch. And that is what they're going to do. They're going to hold off announcing it until they announce the Switch 2. And they'll be like, oh, by the way, Super Mario Odyssey 2 is going to be a Switch 2 launch title. What synergy would that be? Like that has 2 in the name for both of them. It starts the console generation off with a bang, just the same way that Breath of the Wild did with Switch. And Nintendo, I think at this point they said that the next Switch is going to be Switch Next Model, as President Furukawa said on the investor call. And I think that they learned their lesson. They need to have a really strong title from one of their heavy hitting franchises at launch. And they're not going to have a new 3D Zelda game. They're not going to have a new 2D Zelda game because that's going to be one of the final big games for Switch 1. So what does that leave them with? It leaves them with Super Mario Brothers, and we just got a 2D Mario game, so a 3D Mario game is as big as it gets for Nintendo. And that's why I think that is going to be the next 3D Mario game. We've also seen that as a pattern, right? Like I pointed out, for 3D Mario games in particular, they come in sets of twos for the most part, right? So we got Mario 64, and yes, we never got a true sequel to that, but they announced Mario 128 through that tech demo at Space World in 2000. And they intended to make a follow-up to Mario 64. And then eventually we did get Mario Sunshine, which never got a direct sequel. And I think that's because it was a little bit divisive. Then what do we get next, right? We got Wii, we got Mario Galaxy, and we got Mario Galaxy 2. Then on Wii U, we got Mario 3D World, but what was on the 3DS? It was a brother game. It was Mario 3D Land. So those games kind of paired together. Then we got the Switch, we got Mario Odyssey. So following that pattern, Mario Odyssey 2 would be the logical next step. But again, as I pointed out at the start of this show, trying to predict what Nintendo's going to do is a fool's errand. So I also received the following email from Brian Tomaszewski. Hopefully I did not butcher that too bad. Brian says, love the show. I've been listening since the beginning, and I was glad that you were able to keep the show going. Thank you so much. I appreciate your extensive and comprehensive Nintendo coverage. That's very kind of you. I have a question for your Q&A episode. Nintendo was able to take a successful franchise in Zelda and take it to the next level in terms of sales with Breath of the Wild. It's not like Zelda was a niche franchise, but sales really took off with Breath of the Wild. What Nintendo franchise do you think has the potential to experience a similar leap in terms of success? Is there a franchise that you can think of that, with just a few tweaks, could go from being just a successful Nintendo franchise to a mega hit? If so, any ideas on how it could happen? Oh boy. And then no worries if you can't answer. Looking forward to the next episode. Franchises that Nintendo could take with some tweaks and make into a bigger success than it already is. Man. Well, if I had that answer, maybe Nintendo would want to hire me because they've been on fire, right? Because look what they did with Animal Crossing. And of course, that was a benefactor of circumstance. It hit right when COVID hit. Everybody was looking for a game to play. But now Animal Crossing is, if not an S-tier game, an A-tier franchise for Nintendo. Zelda was the example you used. I think Mario's 2D side just kind of did that with Mario Wonder. The 3D side, Odyssey, was a big seller for them. My joke was going to be, I think that Pokemon, if they made a game that functioned properly, it could probably be a pretty big hit. Let me bring up Nintendo's franchises here. Why is it when I search Nintendo franchises, the 4 examples Google's AI algorithm gives me are F-Zero, Earthbound, Nintendogs, and Star Fox? That's what I call the big 4, right? AI is great, folks. All right, so let's see. Mario, Mario Kart. We already talked about what Mario Kart could do from here, but really, what else could they do at this point to make it sell better? I'm not going to worry about any of the Mario sports. Mario and Luigi Brothership looks like it's doing some pretty cool stuff with the Mario and Luigi franchise. Oh man, Mario Paint. I loved Mario Paint growing up, but I don't think that it's the right fit for this. Yoshi, I don't know what innovations they could do, but they've been doing some really cool stuff with that. Now, new aesthetic there could be really neat. Honestly, man, a 3D Donkey Kong game that isn't a collectathon. Think like the Kirby and the Forgotten Land format. Take that, so like linear levels with a little bit of exploration in them. That could be the answer right there. Like Donkey Kong is a beloved character now. I mean, he's always been a beloved character, but ever since the Mario movie in particular, he's been a beloved character. Take that and run with it, man. Like just like give us the 3D Donkey Kong game that we've been wanting since Donkey Kong 64. It's wild to me that they have this hyper recognizable character and they do so little with him in terms of platformers in particular, right? Like Donkey Kong Country, fantastic series. We're finally getting Donkey Kong Country Returns on Switch. But why don't we have that amazing 3D Donkey Kong game? I honestly think that would be a huge win for Nintendo if they could get a really strong 3D Donkey Kong game. Even get, I mean, Rare is a completely different studio at this point, but get Rare to do it if you really want to, or contract Playtonic, the ukulele developers, their former Rare developers. I wasn't a big fan of I wasn't the biggest fan. I liked it just fine of the 3D ukulele. It was a little bit too heavy on the collectathon, but that was its thesis statement, right? It was an homage to the Banjo-Kazooie games that they put out on the N64. They could do some cool stuff with the Donkey Kong license. They have in the past. Yeah, I mean, Star Fox, that could be a really cool, like we covered it on the show before, Retro's pitch of kind of like Star Fox really leaning into like the mercenary side. Nintendo needs to have a really big hit with Star Fox if they ever bring that franchise back. I mean, Star Fox Zero was pretty much their big gambit, right? Like Shigeru Miyamoto was all in on that. He thought that was going to be like the big winner for the Star Fox franchise, and it ended up landing with a dud. And if Nintendo could bring it back and do some amazing stuff with it, I think that retro games pitch, retro studios pitch that they had, where you're Star Fox and you're going around, you kind of can fly around and take missions that you want, kind of Mass Effect style, and then you get money based on how well you do the mission because you're a mercenary, and you can decide how much money you want to invest in Star Fox and how much money you want to send back to Corneria for the rebuild efforts following the war that took place in the earlier games. I think that's an amazing idea, and I'm so bummed that did not ever come to fruition at Retro, because Retro would have been an amazing studio to handle that. Like we're putting all of our faith in them for Metroid Prime 4, and by all indications, it's looking fantastic. But I think they are the studio that could do something cool with Star Fox. And we saw what other studios outside of Nintendo can do with Star Fox. We saw what Ubisoft did with it with Starlink. Wasn't a proper Star Fox game, but that's basically why so many people bought it for Switch. So yeah, I think Star Fox is my answer there, and like kind of stealing Retro Studios' pitch that came out, I want to say last year, and I think that's the way to go, and that's what Nintendo needs. They need a big hit, and relying on that classic Star Fox gameplay, it could very well be the ticket to getting Star Fox back in the mainstream consciousness outside of Super Smash Bros. So with that, I'm going to take one last break this episode, and when I get back, I'll be hitting all of the questions that I received over on the All Things Nintendo Patreon page. I will be right back. As I mentioned, I put out a call on the free All Things Nintendo Patreon page for some questions, comments, and rants, and I got a few of them. So let's run down some of these questions and give some answers before we wrap things up here. So the first one comes from our pal Philly Yeatsteak. They say, what is a first-party IP that Nintendo should give more love to? So I know my last answer was Star Fox. I think that's definitely one of them. But I've got a few others that I'd like to see. The Tomodachi franchise, like I adored Tomodachi Life back on the 3DS. I think there's so much fun stuff they could do with that, and like the Mii's, and being able to have like social simulation stuff with your friends' me's and like celebrities, and so much fun. I'm so upset that Tomodachi Life has not made the jump from 3DS to Switch, because that's one of those games that I would love to go back into, but I'm not going to dust off my 3DS. I'm not even dusting off my 3DS for A Link Between Worlds, let alone Tomodachi Life. But there is a lot of stuff, and I love that there's like there. I believe there were QR codes that you could do, so you could like send people your me, and they would come and visit and like hang out and join like the island that you're living on, and then you could like go do hangouts with the different me's and assign them roommates. And so I had like Dr. Phil and Shaquille O'Neal as roommates, and it was just the zaniest stuff. And you'd like peek into their rooms, and like, I'd have Reggie Fils-Aimé just rolling around on the ground while Shigeru Miyamoto cheers him on. Just the zaniest stuff that you can think of. And it was just such a fun thing. I wish Nintendo would give more love to that. Star Fox already said. Couple that come to mind that I think maybe people forget Nintendo does. I mean, I think Nintendo does this. Let's see. Um, let's see. Yeah, Nintendo developed both of these. 1080 Snowboarding and Wave Race. I don't know about you, but those were two games that I had so much fun with on Nintendo 64. Wave Race in particular, that was, I think, a launch title. If not launch title, it's a launch window game for Nintendo 64. I had a blast with that game. Like, the graphics were incredible for the time. I remember, I think you could race like a killer whale. It's either a killer whale or a dolphin. I'm confused. I'm figuring out in my head if it's if I'm confusing the killer whale's appearance in Sonic Adventure with Wave Race. So I was kind of in the similar era. But 1080 Snowboarding was just an incredible extreme sports game. I would love to see those four franchises make a return: Tomodachi Life, Star Fox, 1080 Snowboarding, and Wave Race. I think those are my answers. And obviously Earthbound. Come on, it's time. It's time for a new Earthbound game. Next up, Grant, who says, "What is your favorite game from each major Nintendo franchise? Feel free to throw in some one-off, not as deep a well games like Kid Icarus or Chibi Robo." All right, well, I'm not a Kid Icarus or Chibi Robo fan, but I will. Let's run down the franchises here. All right, so Mario, Super Mario World, but I'll give a top three Mario just because it's such a vast franchise. So Super Mario World number one, Super Mario Brothers 3 number two, and man, no, I might put Odyssey at number two. Yeah, let's just do Odyssey at number two, and then Mario 3 at number three. Zelda, I'll do the same thing. I would say Breath of the Wild number one, Tears of the Kingdom number two, or no, Ocarina of Time number two, and then for the sake of variety, I will say A Link Between Worlds. I love A Link Between Worlds. But yeah, honorable mentions: Twilight Princess, Wind Waker, Tears of the Kingdom, obviously, all amazing games. A Link to the Past. But yeah, so Mario, I'll do Mario World, Zelda, Breath of the Wild, Animal Crossing, New Horizons, Mario Kart. I have a soft spot for Super Mario Kart on SNES and Mario Kart 64, but the answer is so clearly Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Donkey Kong. I'll do the original Donkey Kong Country. I know most people will say 2, but I just have such nostalgia for Donkey Kong Country 1 on SNES. I've told the story so many times about how my dad and I would play that game and just have an amazing time. We still will fire it up from time to time. Kirby. I'll say Forgotten Land. I really liked Forgotten Land, although Kirby Superstar was really fun. Triple Deluxe is great. Man. Yeah, I'm going to Return to Dreamland is awesome as well. I'm going to go with Forgotten Land, though. Mario Party. I think Mario Party Superstars is the best one, although I will always have nostalgia for those first two on N64 in particular. Metroid. I'll do Zero Mission. Super Metroid's fantastic. Metroid Prime, particularly the remaster, is fantastic. Dread, I had a lot of fun with. I'm going to go Metroid Zero Mission. That is also an asterisk that I have not played Metroid Fusion. I'm going to try to fix that at some point in the future. Pokemon, in terms of personal importance, I will say Red and Blue, just because that was my first RPG that I ever spent any significant time in, and I've beaten it so many times I've lost count. In terms of my favorite, though, I'm going to go Soul Silver. Soul Silver and Heart Gold. Just, I think that's the best Pokemon's ever been, and it might be the best Pokemon ever will be. Splatoon. I probably spent the most time with Splatoon 1. I'm going to go Splatoon 3. I think Splatoon 3 is by far the most feature rich. The single player, I think, is better than Splatoon 2's, and the multiplayer is awesome, even if it doesn't have the nostalgia factor that the first Splatoon does. I think Splatoon 1's soundtrack is the best, and I think that's why I love it so much, a large part of it, and also the novelty was still pretty fresh then. But yeah, Splatoon 3, the DLC is also pretty good. Star Fox, pretty easily 64. I still love that game so much. Star Fox 64 3D was amazing. I wish that they could figure out some way to capture that magic. And then Super Smash Brothers, it is so easily ultimate. I know there's Melee purists. For a while, Wii U was pretty easily in that conversation as well. The original Smash has a lot of importance to me, but Ultimate is very easily the answer for a ton of reasons. Let me give some more obscure ones that I can think of. Box Boy. That's a Nintendo franchise, right? I really like the first Box Boy a lot. I have not played all the Box Boy games. Box Boy plus Box Girl was pretty fun. But yeah, I'm gonna go with the original Box Boy. Rhythm Heaven, again, another one that I didn't really spend a ton of time with, but I played Megamix and I enjoyed the crap out of it. I know that's kind of cheating because that's a greatest hits collection. But yeah, Rhythm Heaven Megamix. I wish that would come over to Switch. Uh, Talking about sports games, Ken Griffey Jr. You remember those games? I loved. So Ken Griffey Jr. presents Major League Baseball on Super Nintendo. Then on N64, it was Ken Griffey Jr.'s Winning Run. And then finally, we got Major League Baseball featuring Ken Griffey Jr. That was the second N64 game. That is my pick. I poured so many hours into that. That was at the peak of my love for baseball. This was back in my phase of me wanting to be a baseball player as a profession. I gave up my dream of being a sports writer, a sports journalist, and went for being just an athlete in general. And I was trying, I was never even like remotely realistically going to be a Major League Baseball player. I was a decent baseball player. I was pretty good. I was a good shortstop, but that went part and parcel with being obsessed with all video games involving baseball. I collected all the video games. My favorite sports game of all time is actually a Genesis game. It's Triple Play Gold Edition on Sega Genesis. Probably my favorite sports game of all time. Maybe rivaled by like NBA Street Volume 2. Major League Baseball featuring Ken Griffey Jr. on N64 is up there. And again, it just hit the right time. I don't even know how it holds up, but I adored that game. And then Street Pass. Yeah, Street Pass. Puzzle Swap. I was obsessed with that as well. Like, you know, meeting people in Street Pass and then taking them like getting puzzle pieces from them and filling out the puzzles. I loved that. I think I completed the puzzles and then eventually they added some more, and I don't think I ever completed those because by then I think I had pretty much moved on from my 3DS. And also, it's not a franchise because it's only a one-off game. But shout out to Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker. But the next part of the question is, what are your favorite games from each console? All right, so let's go console by console here. And so we start off with the NES, right? I am going to go Super Mario Brothers 3 for that. At the time, it was just the perfect platformer, and it felt like such a leap forward after Mario and Mario 2. Whether you're talking Lost Levels in Japan, or what was considered Mario 2 in Japan versus what was considered Mario 2 in the US. Super Mario Brothers 3 was just such a monumental leap forward, and it felt like the biggest thing that had ever happened in pop culture when it came out. And I still remember playing it and being like, this is bigger than anything that is just I've ever seen in the world of video games, and it still holds up. It's still a fantastic game. Yeah, Super Mario Brothers 3 is my pick for the NES. Game Boy, we'll go Pokemon Red and Blue for all the reasons I mentioned before. It just holds such a special place in my heart, and I can still replay it today. And just I know all the little like nooks and crannies you need to go into, all the ways to beat all the gym bosses or the gym leaders and Elite Four trainers. Such a great game. I love it. It still just tickles the nostalgia bone, and also just a super enjoyable game whenever I play it. Virtual Boy. Didn't play a whole lot of Virtual Boy, believe it or not. I don't think most people did. My only memory with the Virtual Boy is at a Toys R Us. I went to Toys R Us and I saw they had a Virtual Boy kiosk set up, and I played a probably 3 minutes of Mario's Tennis. And I think that's the extent of my experience with the Virtual Boy. So I'm just going to say Mario's Tennis. That's all I got. SNES would be next. Super Mario World. Easy. Link to the Past, honorable mention. Super Metroid, honorable mention. A Link to the Past. Donkey Kong Country, honorable mention. But Super Mario World, far and away, is my favorite Super Nintendo game of all time. That would take us to Game Boy Advance. I want to say Pokemon Fire Red Leaf Green, but that feels like a little bit of a cop out. Well, maybe not, because the other pick is also a remake, and that is Metroid Zero Mission. I'm going to go Fire Red Leaf Green, even though I basically said that same game as my pick for the original Game Boy. Nintendo 64, Ocarina of Time, though I will always have a lot of love for GoldenEye. I'll have a lot of love for Star Fox, Super Smash Brothers, Mario Kart 64, all those games so beloved for me and my friend group growing up. GameCube. I was not the biggest GameCube fan in the moment, believe it or not. I was never like Luigi's Mansion didn't do it for me back in the day. Mario Sunshine didn't do it for me back in the day. The game that I'm going to name didn't do it for me back in the day, but revisiting it through the Wii U made me have an all new appreciation for it. That is The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. Just one of the best Zelda games ever made. I was one of the problems when it came to being turned off by the graphics in that time. You have to remember, I was in high school when this game came out, and I thought that I was beyond the cartoony graphics. And then you look at it 20 years later and you're like, my God, it still looks amazing. It's still so beautiful. And the dungeons are fantastic. The soundtrack is amazing. Yes, there were some problems with the Triforce Hunt, and they alleviated that a little bit with Wind Waker HD. They alleviated the inability to change the wind direction with Wind Waker HD. I think Wind Waker for GameCube is probably my answer. It was the best combat had ever been in Zelda. Actually, you know what? I'm going to change my answer. Twilight Princess, because we're not talking about the HD versions. We're talking about the GameCube versions. And I think Twilight Princess is better on GameCube, but I think Wind Waker is better on Wii U. So we're going to go with Twilight Princess for GameCube, actually. DS. I'm going to go Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. It's my favorite Pokemon game. It's also my favorite DS game. That brings us to Wii. Would it be a cop-out to say Wii Sports? Would that be too obvious? Would that be too much of a casual answer? If it is, I mean, because that's the game that I put so much time into. Maybe Mario Galaxy 1. That's probably my answer. But then there's an honorable mention for WarioWare Smooth Moves. 3DS, very easily a link between worlds. I liked a lot of games on 3DS. Pokemon XY, special shout out to that. That's the game that got me back into Pokemon. But A Link Between Worlds is one of my favorite games of my favorite franchise, so it's hard to beat that. Wii U. Lots of great games on the Wii U. I'm not going to count Breath of the Wild because that's not where I played it. I'm going to go Super Mario 3D World. I think it's one of the more underrated Mario games. I'm so glad it came over to the Switch. And I think it deserves all the praise it's gotten and then some. It's one of the better 3D Mario games, and it doesn't get enough love. And then finally, the Switch, very easily, Breath of the Wild. Like I've said so many times, my favorite video game of all time. Next up, we have Wham Bam Sam the Gaming Man asking me to dust off my crystal ball. They say, in your opinion, do you think the Switch 2 will be an instant sellout, or do you think people will wait for the console's library to grow a bit first? When the PS5 came out, the first year seemed fairly slow on releases, and it's not like the current Switch is now short of upcoming new games. I personally will be pre ordering as soon as possible. I'm worried scalpers are going to ruin everyone's chances of getting their hands on one otherwise. Yeah, so Nintendo has traditionally been pretty bad about keeping stock in stores, right? The Switch was almost impossible to find for the early phases. The Wii was the same thing. 3DS for a while was a little bit tricky to find, but it didn't really sell out the gate as well as like the Wii. You could find Wii U pretty easily, but I mean that's a kind of a special case. Yeah, I mean, ever since the Wii and like, I mean, the Super Nintendo was also that way. The original NES was that way, where like once people figured out that it was cool and it became like the hot item, it was hard to find. Like you can go find old news clips on YouTube from like NBC Nightly News back in the day. I think it was them, or 60 Minutes talking about parents in the 80s and early 90s trying to find a Nintendo for their kids, and it's just impossible to find. They're sold out everywhere. So this is not a new phenomenon that Nintendo has had their games selling out everywhere, or their consoles in the early phases selling out everywhere. In fact, it's kind of the norm. I think that almost it's like a mark of failure that if Nintendo can't sell out their consoles in the early months. And Nintendo has also done a lot of that artificial scarcity. So I think the Switch 2 will be pretty much an instant sellout. That said, the Switch has been so popular. There are people still buying Nintendo Switches to this day, and there's still amazing games announced for it, as you mentioned. There's still new releases on the horizon that people are very excited about. We just saw that Nintendo Direct and how many great games and how many highly anticipated games are on the way. That might make it so people hold off. They might be like, oh no, we just got Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. We don't need to buy a new Nintendo console unless, like I said earlier, we get Mario Odyssey 2. Jeez, what am I saying? So I think if Nintendo does deliver that killer first party game that people don't want to wait for, that is going to be crucial. But even so, I think if they call it Switch 2, really convey this is the next thing of that console that you have already, more than likely, and have absolutely loved. This is a bigger and better version. It's going to have amazing new games that you can't get on Switch 1. A big shout out if it does play all the old Switch games as well. I think it's going to be a big hit. In terms of will it sell out and will the scalpers ruin it? I think it's probably a pretty good bet. Scalpers have ruined so much, right? Like concert tickets, sneakers. So much of that has been ruined by scalpers, right? I think that Switch 2, based on the popularity of the first Switch, it is going to be a massive target for scalpers. And I think it is because of that scarcity that is inevitably going to show up, whether that's because of scalpers or because Nintendo doesn't produce enough consoles for launch. I think that's going to increase demand as well. I think people are going to see like, oh man, the Switch 2 came out. I can't find it anywhere. That's the only place I can play the new Mario game. I think that people are going to be losing their minds trying to get the Switch 2 in the first year that it's out. I'm hoping that I'm wrong. I'm hoping Nintendo overproduces them, but that's not like Nintendo. And I think that that is going to ultimately be why it's going to be a hot item to find on the shelves when it comes out, presumably in 2025. And then finally, to wrap this up, Zach over on the Patreon page just went off, and I honestly I could not appreciate it more. Zach posts, "Okay, here is a rant from a diehard Metroid fan. I remember watching the original 2017 E3 teaser for Metroid Prime 4. It was the summer before my freshman year of college. As I write this, I've just finished my first day of my fourth job post graduation. Well, congratulations on the new job, at least, Zach. I bring this up because now that we finally have gameplay and a release window for Metroid Prime 4, it's time to get real about what to expect here. I think we all believe it will be graphically impressive, but if it ends up being only around 8 to 12 hours like the first 3 games in the trilogy were, no matter how strong that experience is, it will still seem disappointing having waited so long at this point. Thanks, love the show, and happy travels." Thank you. I think that it's going to be a tricky thing, right? Like we've talked about how this game was announced in 2017, as you mentioned, and shortly after that, Nintendo took the game away from Bandai Namco and reassigned it. They rebuilt it from the ground up. They started from scratch with Retro Studios. Normally, we don't get game announcements, especially from Nintendo, until pretty late in the cycle. We just learned about Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. We don't know how long that has been in development. That could have been in development for 5 years now, and we are just hearing about it now. Super Mario Brothers Wonder, you know that was in development for many, many years. And we'd heard about it the summer before it came out. That is Nintendo's typical modus operandi. Their typical way of doing things, especially in the 2020s, is announce a game and then release it a few months later. We did not get that with Metroid Prime 4, obviously. I mean, there was extenuating circumstances. I don't think that the reason it took so long is because it's going to be some 40-hour epic. I think that it would be shocking to me if this game is longer than 20 hours. I think the reason it took so long is because it didn't take really that much longer than an actual, like a normal game takes to develop. I think that the reason it seems to have taken so long is because it was announced really before development, like a year before development in on what we will eventually know as Metroid Prime 4 even started, because everything that was worked on in the lead up to that announcement and everything that was worked on for basically the year following that announcement was scrapped completely. I mean, maybe they took some ideas, but development itself seemingly was completely scrapped. That's why it took so long. That's why it seems to have taken so long. And yes, I understand why that would be frustrating as somebody who's waited so long, and especially like, in those formative years, going from college freshman to job number 4 post grad. I get it. That's a long time to wait. That's a lot of life events that you have endured waiting for this game to finally come out. And the finish line is in sight. You've seen gameplay of this game. It looks fantastic. You are ready to immerse yourself in this. I understand why, after a 7+ year wait, why it would feel lackluster if it's only an 8 to 12 hour experience. But at the same time, you have to look at what the track record is for the studio, what the track record is for the franchise, and just kind of take into account the fact that, I mean, I almost think of it as, I don't know if you've ever seen the Foo Fighters documentary Back and Forth. It's a very good music documentary. But it chronicled, the first half of it chronicles the formation and all the trials and tribulations that the Foo Fighters did. And obviously, if you don't know, the Foo Fighters were founded by Dave Grohl, who was the drummer of Nirvana prior to Kurt Cobain's death. And because of that, the Foo Fighters had all of this turnover that happened in the public eye. And, they talked about this, how, most bands go through this where, like, oh, well, the drummer got kicked out or the bassist left and like quit the band. But most of that happens before the band hits it big. But because the Foo Fighters from the very jump were in the public eye due to Dave Grohl's association with Nirvana, which, when that band ended, they were one of the biggest bands on the planet. So of course, the drummer's new band is going to immediately draw attention, because that all happened in the public eye, where they're finding out what the long term lineup is going to be. It seemed like this was all happening more so than other bands. And it's accurate that a lot of bands, before they hit it big, they go through several different members, and then they finally settle on the band that's going to be the band that is like the mainstay lineup, right? Like Guns N' Roses had different members at different points when they were called Hollywood Rose. And you know, we've seen different singers come on. Look at Van Halen. That's another example. But like, I'm digressing here. The fact is, this wait has happened very publicly because it was announced before development even started, and all of any kind of trials and tribulations that has happened on the development cycle has happened post announcement. So that's why all of this is happening with Metroid Prime, and it feels like it has been such a long wait. And I think Nintendo, it's rare that they announce a game so early on in development. Like Tears of the Kingdom is another one of those games that was announced very early on in development. I would not be surprised if they planned, when they announced that in 2019 at E3, if they planned for that to come out earlier than 2023. But that's ultimately what we got. And I think Nintendo has learned lessons in the 2020s to wait until, a few months before the game is ready to come out before announcing it. So yeah. So Zach said, thanks, love the show, and happy travels. Thank you. And despite that sign off, Zach came back later and threw an avalanche of questions that I'll do my best to rapid fire here. What Nintendo game/franchise would you like to see get a return on Switch 2? Donkey Kong Country or Donkey Kong 3D platformer. I mentioned that earlier. NES remake, or not remake, remix is another one that I would love to see have another crack. I would love to see SNES remix, or we're next week getting NES World Championships NES edition, or Nintendo World Championships NES edition. I would love to see a Nintendo World Championships SNES edition if we're not going to get an NES or SNES remix. F-Zero would be really awesome to see that kind of long dormant franchise return, and remind people that outside of F-Zero 99, I guess, that Captain Falcon is not just a Super Smash Brothers character. And I guess on that same front, Earthbound. Let's get some Earthbound action, right? Let's bring that back. Next up from Zach, top 3 Nintendo console libraries. I think Switch, easily number 1. I'll say SNES number 2, and N64 number 3, which is interesting that I would go that. I just think the N64 beats the GameCube. I think it beats the NES. Original Game Boy it beats, I think. Even though the N64 is an interesting case because it's a much smaller library than I ever thought. Like, look up how small the N64 library is, and it'll shock you. But I think that the games that exist at the top are so good that it carries it above the other consoles. Wii U, I've defended as having a very good library. 3DS has a very good library. Wii has a great, again, like great games at the top, but there's so much shovelware mixed in because of the popularity of motion controls. It's hard for me to give it to that. The next question is, what's a game studio that you're always excited to see what they're cooking up? Nintendo specific, I will go, I mean, I guess this counts now. Atlas, or more specifically P Studio, the studio behind the Persona games. Let's see here. Sucker Punch over on the PlayStation side That's a really good one. Ghost of Tsushima is incredible. I love the Infamous games. Like Ghost of Tsushima, one of my favorite games of all time. You can, if you're watching the video version, you can maybe see my Steam Deck sitting on the counter. I recently tried out Ghost of Tsushima on Steam Deck, and I played it on PS4 and PS5. But you know, it's something special having that on the go. I'm really hoping that's what Switch 2 captures. Is like, you know, that was what Switch 1 captured back in 2017, but now Steam Deck is kind of eating its lunch a little bit with the enormous Steam library and the fact that I can play games like Ghost of Tsushima on the go. I recently bought Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, and it plays so much, or it looks so much better, runs so much better than it does on the Switch, that, you know, I prefer the Steam Deck version now if I'm going to play it on the go. Number 4 from Zach: best and worst parts of working in gaming news slash journalism. Best part is, you know, being a part of this industry that I have loved for, you know, 34 of my 37 years of life. Being able to interview the people who make these games, like, I still have to kind of pinch myself that I've been able to sit down and have extended conversations with the likes of Shigeru Miyamoto and Koji Kondo and Eiji Aonuma and Hidetaka Miyazaki. Um, you know, that's just something incredible. And also, the people in the industry are largely some of the best people I've ever met. Some of my closest friends I've made in this industry, and I think that that is that, and the fact that I just get to work in a field that I adore with all my heart. Something I don't take for granted in any way, shape, or form. Even on the hard days, I remind myself how lucky I am. Worst part, I think that it's you see it all over the place in this industry, is that the people who work in the industry and the people who are the ones that are making the magic happen, whether it's creating a game or running websites. We see websites shuttered all the time. It feels like the people who are in charge of the money see the workers as disposable. And I think that that is pretty industry wide, unfortunately, but it really, it hits close to home working in games media. And it's really unfortunate because, you know, it has driven so many talented, amazing, just incredible media personalities, journalists, critics out of it. And, you know, we're all worse. All of us who love games media and games journalism, and, you know, reading the latest opinion pieces and features and deep dive interviews and oral histories, we are all worse because of the ways that these companies treat the workers in these fields. And honestly, it's frustrating. It is downright frustrating, and that's, you know, that's the worst part for sure. Um, Number 5 from Zach: if Nintendo came to you saying they would make a game out of any idea or concept that you have, what might you say? Can be existing IPs or a new one. I have two that I've mentioned before, and I won't dwell on them too much. A Zelda roguelite where you play as Ganon and you're trying to take over Hyrule, and each time you fail, you respawn. I mean, you know, you fail because Link defeats you or something. You respawn, and you can power up with any stuff that you've earned over the course of your run, and you respawn in a different art style. And it's all different art style, right? So like you can spawn and it's the NES Zelda art style, and then you respawn and it's Wind Waker art style. Like that would be a really cool way to play off of that idea that Ganon is reincarnated, and like the hatred of Ganon just kind of reemerges every so often to be a plague on Hyrule. Like I love that concept that I I had so much, and yeah, that's one that I would love. I mean, then the other one that's very obvious, Lego Super Mario Brothers. You know, they have this partnership with Lego to create these special Mario sets. I think it would be a missed opportunity. We were already seeing Lego Horizon Adventures coming to Nintendo, which is a PlayStation IP, but it's Lego, so it makes sense to come to Switch. It would be a missed opportunity. Well, I mean, I guess now it would work too with Zelda. but to not do a Lego Super Mario Brothers or a Lego Zelda game. They could even make that the long-awaited Zelda Maker, right? Like you could have like a Lego adventure with Link and Zelda, but then have a build mode where you can create your own Hyrule or dungeons or whatever. I think that would be a cool way to leverage the Mario Maker concept, but in a new way that makes sense through that Lego license. So I think that would be incredible. And then Zach ends with, keep up the great work. I have a 6-hour drive as I write this, so I'm excited to listen to your latest episode. Thank you so much. Truly, thank you so much to everybody who wrote in. I mean, we're going to wrap up the episode here. Yeah, before we wrap up, though, I wanted to make a quick announcement. If you're a listener of this show and you want to rep the podcast in the real world, you will soon be able to do that. I have actually partnered with the folks over at TeePublic to offer all things Nintendo merchandise. Right now, we have an abbreviated logo of this very show's logo, and other designs are in the works, but you can put whatever kind of shirt you want on there and, make it your own. You can rep it however you want. You can just go to teepublic.com, search all things Nintendo to find the new storefront. And right now there's that logo tee, and there's going to be some other designs that are going to be added. And if folks are interested, let me know, like what you'd be interested in. And heck, if you even have an idea for a shirt idea, like a phrase or something like that, let me know, and I can work with the designers over at TeePublic and make it a reality. So yeah, go check that out if you'd like to support the show. There are going to be other ways you can support the show in the coming months. Just kind of laying out plans for that, but that is one way to support the show in addition to listening to the ads that play over top. I know that people have expressed annoyance at the ads. I'm sorry. I'm doing my best to place them in logical places, we'll say, places that don't interrupt the flow of the conversation. But we got to keep the lights on for the podcast. I'm funding this all myself 100% at this point. So thank you so much, everyone who is supporting the show. And thank you so much to everyone for listening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, throw All Things Nintendo a 5-star review. Hit that subscribe button. If you want to get any questions or comments in, you can get in touch with me at brian@allthingsnintendo.com. Hit me up on social media at Brian P. Shea, or leave a comment on the free All Things Nintendo Patreon page. Also, be sure to find All Things Nintendo on YouTube and subscribe to that channel. You can search for All Things Nintendo or visit at Brian P. Shea on YouTube. And if you liked this first ever solo episode of All Things Nintendo, let me know, because it's always hard to kind of tell in the moment. But if you like it, maybe we'll do it again. And if you hated it, maybe we won't. Like I said, when I took the show independent, the reason the show is still alive is as much thanks to you as it is to me. Your passion, your appreciation of this show motivated me to keep it alive when things shifted over at Game Informer. And it continues to keep going, even during busy times. So truly, thank you from the bottom of my heart. It means the world to me. That is our show for this week. Thank you again for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time.